Hey y'all, Billy from Perma Pastures Farm. Alrighty, well, I want to thank so many of you that have jumped on board as of late. It's a joy to have you. And hopefully our content is exactly what you're looking for, because in these times, and that's what we're going to talk about today, in these times there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily comfortable. And that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, I keep hearing this, and it seems as of late, everybody, it seems I turn around and that I have a conversation with, and no matter the capacity, by and large seems to say, man, I wish we can get back to the good old days. Okay. You know, I'm only 50 years old, but I have what I think is an understanding of what I think the good old days are. And everybody does, at least my age and maybe a few years younger, because the world was one way and now it's something totally different, especially over the last couple of years. But if I see this dramatic change in my 50 years, I can't imagine what it must be like for people that have seen it over a period of, let's say, 60 years or 70 or 80. Take your pick. I mean, obviously things change, but can we honestly say they've changed for the better? Let's go back to that good old days thing, okay? I'm going to give you a historical backdrop and things that, I don't know, maybe you haven't considered. Maybe nobody, well, I think a number of people have considered. In fact, when I've sat down with Danny at Deep South Homestead, these are one of those conversations to an extent that he and I have talked about that you can't necessarily share with anybody. And it has to do with getting back to the good old days. Now, his podcast does a wonderful job of focusing you back to the fundamental things that created happiness in the simplest ways in many of our lives. And if they haven't in the past, that maybe we should try to rediscover a renaissance of sorts, you know, and trying to figure out and discover what those things are. Sorry about the noise, y'all. The bull's down there just, he's being a bull. He's doing what he does. Anyway, he's down there and yeah, the sunlight's a little bit weird, so I'm not sure what you can make out of it. But look, good old days. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about what it's going to take to get there. Now, some of you people may just jump off because I'm going to provide information that maybe you don't want to hear, you've never heard of. I mean, there's a reason why the homestead, how should I call them? The homestead reality channels are the most popular. And that's normal. I mean, I could do that sort of thing if I wanted, but I don't, and I won't, and I never will. Because everybody is reluctant to see the full extent of the things that are going on in this world. Now, let's talk about the good old days, okay? Let me ask you a question, first of all. And you may not have the backdrop to understand it unless you're a little bit older. And I dare say over maybe the age of 30 or more. Let me ask you, the good old days. Let's talk about that for a second. Can you think of a single time in the history of humanity that a decadent society has ever corrected itself without what I call the crucible of really hard times? Can you think of it? Can you provide a single answer in which, and like I said, answer this question, where a extremely decadent society has ever corrected itself without the crucible of really hard times? I'll wait. Because the answer is no, you can't find it. And in fact, the most recent example that any of us can probably cite, at least on a large scale, was the Great Depression. Okay, so let's look at the backdrop prior to the Great Depression. Okay? You had, let's say, chicken in every pot, as the saying goes. There's a reason it was called the Roaring 20s. Decadence was everywhere. Some would say, well, I would say unbridled. Well, I've read it before that it was unbridled decadence, but decadence itself means that it was unbridled. So let's just call it what the popular historians have called it. Decadent, unbridled decadence. Okay? So everybody was having a wonderful time. The world was wonderful in their perspective. Then lo and behold, what happens? Great Depression, stock market crash. What did that produce? Okay, so, and I've talked about it before. So during that time, depending on the numbers you look at, we lost 8 to 10 million people to starvation during that time, at a time where 90% of the population lived rurally, like this. 10% lived in the city. And still you had that many people perish for any number of reasons. Starvation, many of them say. Now, if you ask people that have been here in these hollers and mountains for a long time, like people like Justin, who have the backdrop of like 8 generations of mountain wisdom around here, they barely even knew it was happening the whole time in the Great Depression. Only thing that they recall, according to him, is if I remember correctly, is that salt was hard to find sometimes. Coffee, which was a luxury in those days, was tough to find at times. But those people basically made it through and they didn't even know it happened by and large. How cool is that? How would you like to be one of those people? Or maybe their lives were already rich and tough. The two can overlap at the same time that they barely even noticed. Now, let's look at it prior to that. Let's look at an ancient reference. Look at Rome, okay? Now, I've done a great deal of study on Rome. In fact, there's an article that I referenced before, Schumpeter's Rome, where it provides a little bit of an overlay of what it was like at Rome prior to the fall and after the fall. Now imagine, just imagine, you are a person that's living in the vicinity of Rome after the collapse. You're looking at aqueducts. You're looking at things that were nothing short of wonders in your mind. Let's say you were 100 years later. That's why they called it the classical age. That's why it was called later the Renaissance or rebirth. It was a rediscovery of what they lost. But now imagine you're one of those nomads rolling through ancient Rome and you're looking to the left and you're seeing the Colosseum over here. You're seeing, all these incredible structures that were lost. The technology and how to do it was lost. So what happened? How many hundreds of years later did it take before they had the rebirth or the Renaissance? It took a long time, huh? And what it produced was astonishing. But what did it require? It required a crucible of really, really hard times. Okay, those are two I can pick from the top of my head. I could probably fill volumes. There he is, right on time. I could probably fill volumes of all the examples I can provide historically of all these great societies that were once phenomenal, great, did unbelievable things. Where do you think these wonders of the world came from? It came from those societies. How many of them exist today? No, all we see are the remnants of what is left of these once great societies. Now, I know that I'm not filling you with a whole lot of, I know you're not thinking, oh man, this is not a whole lot of encouragement. But to a certain extent there is. Right now, we're seeing Canadians being beat over the head right now, getting kicked on the ground. We're seeing some astonishing, dreadful things unfolding to our brothers and sisters of the North. And this dog seems determined to just knock me over because he's the greatest Pyrenees and he knows it. We're seeing all these things unfold right now in the Great White North, and they're not wonderful. And we're seeing an acquiescence of the people that are doing the protesting, and no matter where you stand on that thing. We're also wondering, and I've heard this a lot as of late, like, what's wrong with us in the United States of Amnesia? How come we aren't doing this? Got news for you. It hasn't gotten bad enough yet. The only cure, and I'm going to lose some people over this, but since when do I care about that sort of thing? The only cure to this level of unbridled decadence is starvation. I know that doesn't make anybody's day, but that's exactly what the cure is. You cannot become this decadent. And if you look at it from a historical backdrop, you cannot become this decadent without, there can be no correction. Let me say it this way. There cannot be any correction until people are finally starving. Yeah, I know that I didn't just make your day with that, but I'm giving you the honest truth because I keep hearing people saying the same thing over and over. I want to get back to the good old days. I can't wait till things get back to normal. I got news for you. It ain't going to happen. Not in the way you expect. And I know this isn't the best news in the world and it's not what you want to hear, but you can mitigate certain things. You can do, like my friend and mentor Danny has said numerous times, pray that your place becomes Goshen in the middle of Egypt. Because I dare say that the decadence of ancient Egypt wasn't anywhere near what it is in the United States of Amnesia. If you doubt me, do you think the homeless in Egypt had cell phones and Netflix subscriptions? They probably didn't. They didn't. So At the end of the day, that's exactly the place where all of us need to be working. You can read the tea leaves. You can see what's going on. You can see all these things unfolding. And if you hear a little noise in the background, that's my dog being what he is. Look, at the end of the day, and I know this isn't pleasant news or anything. At the end of the day, many of us who are aware and awake, yeah, the two can overlap, are realizing that, like this flag behind me, that's not disrespect, folks. For the folks that seem to think it is, that no. Look it up. When the flag's upside down, it's not disrespect. And it's been that way for well over a year now. Find out what it means. I'm not going to answer all the questions for you. Just find out what that means, and then you'll discover and you'll understand why it flies the way it does. And I shudder to think what it's going to take to flip it upside down again. All right, y'all. If you need anything, check out the website. Check out the description box below. Check us out on Patreon. Like I said, this isn't the happiest news in the world, but at the end of the day, there are ways to mitigate yourself. And like I said in the last video, it needs to start with prayer. It really does. All right, y'all. This is Billy from Perma Pastures Farm, where permaculture is my passion. We'll see you next time.